What's good, YouTube? It's me, your boy Squiddy, back in another Squiddy. So today I want to do a ban list video about the cards that I actually think need to go to either 0 or to 1. This is not necessarily a ban list prediction, but rather to address the problematic cards in the format that actually need to be dealt with in order to make the current state of Yu-Gi-Oh! A better place for everyone. So, starting at the top, we're only going to talk about 0 or 1 cards. I don't think that cards going to 2 or 3 necessarily impact the metagame at all. In fact, it's mostly cards that actually need to get banned or be reduced down to 1 copy for consistency issues. So, at the start, obviously, ARCHFIEND Calamity King, this card just needs to go. It's a card that is either playable or terrible, and anytime it's playable, it's absolutely busted because it says that your opponent effectively cannot play the game. And we all know that cards like VFD are already gone from the game for that exact reason. It's just not fair when there's a deck that can go first, win the die roll. If you don't open like double hand trap or more, they're just going to spit out their entire combo and end on this card. So you basically have no recursion, no way to win. Board breakers, cards like that are just absolutely useless. You get no way to play on your turn. So in my opinion, it's just a card that needs to go. There's not much more to say about that. Talking about other cards that say you can't play, Dimensional Barrier, I actually think this card should be banned because it's become a card that's effectively a blanket effect, and we all know a lot of blanket effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are absolutely broken. In fact, in my opinion, they should stop printing cards that say your opponent cannot do this for the rest of the turn, or this for the rest of the turn. Like, it just creates this weird state of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it restricts design choices as well. And the way that Konami is currently designing their cards is that they're printing fusion decks or XYZ decks that only do that specific type of summon. So for example, they're printing decks like Purely that can only do XYZ summoning. You have decks like Chimera that can only use fusion summoning, same with Branded. It's like they restrict themselves into fusion summoning, so it's not like we can do any other type of summons even if we wanted to. And then if someone flips Dimensional Barrier, it's effectively just a blanket that says you can't play. So it's gotten to the point where the power creep in Yu-Gi-Oh! Has made this card absolutely busted, and I just feel like it's not fair when your opponent goes up. First, they set up a board, they set this card, and if you're playing like a Fusion XYZ Synchro deck and you try to play, they flip this and you basically lose because you can't play the game. So any card that says you cannot play and auto wins on the spot, I think should just not be a part of the game. This game should be a lot more skillful and not have to rely on cards like that. Other cards that are kind of annoying, I would say Skill Drain. I want to see this card go to 1. Like, guys, I have no idea why they banned Imperial Order and then they brought back Skill Drain to 3. It's like monkey paw curling in all sorts of directions. We don't want this card at 3. It's just an annoying card that has little counterplay. And the thing is, again, back to the design choices of Konami R&D, we're not getting decks that allow you to pop spell or traps inherently with the in-engine spells or traps. We're not getting decks that can use monster effects in the hand or graveyard to pop spells and traps. We're only getting decks that use powerful monster effects on the field. But this gets negated by Skill Drain, and the decks that are able to run this, they can supplement it with other trap cards. They can supplement it with big beaters for some reason, like Labyrinth has 3k attack, you know, even decks like Eldritch, like 3500 attack. It's like there's no real counterplay to this card. It's not like we can just summon our monsters and try to beat and win for game. All they have to do is get a monster wall on the board, and then we can't play anymore. So in my opinion, this is the type of card that should probably go to 1. Like, yeah, I wouldn't complain if it got banned, but obviously they probably wouldn't do that. So if it goes to 1, that's fine. It'll be like how it was before. This is the Saki 1-of card. It does not rear its ugly head every game 2 and 3 when we're going second because this card is sided in at 3 or even main decked at 3 copies, right? Another card that absolutely needs to go is D-Shifter. This card, I've always been ranting and raving about the fact that the card is absolutely busted. There's no counterplay to this card. Like, there's very, very little counterplay, okay? We don't have things like Called by the Grave, obviously. You can make something like Baguska, but the decks that can play this typically can get rid of the Baguska. For example, KASHTIRA, they put up like a Scareclaw Cash, and decks can't really easily spit out a Baguska without investing a lot of resources onto the table nowadays. You have to go like neg 1 or 2 sometimes to make it, even if your deck can even accommodate it. And it's just like, the decks that can play this, it's one-sided because it does not hurt them in any capacity. It's a 2-turn blanket effect, so I can't play on my opponent's turn, and I cannot play on my turn either. And it shuts down hand traps too. Cards like Drone Lockbird, it instantly just nullifies because of the fact that they have to be sent to the graveyard for cost. So it's like, why is there a card that's basically auto-win against 90% of the decks in the metagame, and it's just like, there's no counterplay. It's good going first or second, And anytime it's dropped, 9 times out of 10, or even like 99 times out of 100, the game is just over on the spot because they're able to mount a board or anything. Even like a Fenrir with like a D-shifter is often enough because on the crackback, they just kill you. So I just want to see this card go. I don't want any more blanket effects, please. This might be a little controversial, but I actually want to talk about some dragon stuff. And I think Chaos Space is the type of card that needs to be limited because it just does so much for the deck. Being able to add a baby dragon and effectively go like +4 or +5 off that one exchange, on top of being able to return back a card to draw a card, is just way too broken in my opinion. This searches a lot of things. It has a lot of utility. I think when this card was designed, it was almost designed in a way that they wanted it to work with the Rogue Chaos support, but it somehow became busted because of the fact that it, coupled with the baby dragons, allows Dragon Link to just extend like crazy. And I think Dragon Link, honestly, it's not because it won Worlds. I've always been saying this, but the deck has gotten to the point where it actually needs to be addressed, because if there's nothing keeping it in check, like ARISEHEART or Shifter, then the deck is absolutely insane. They just can play through almost anything. Even Nibiru, they have Heradic Seal, stuff like that to kind of deal with the cards that might have been issues for them. And it just gets to the point where if ARISEHEART was actually out of the format, Dragon Links would easily be one of the top 2 decks, at least, because of the fact that they can play through anything. They have a billion extenders. They just don't care about like anything in the format, and they just can keep playing because they have so many powerful cards on top of the BYSTIALs being annoying. So I just think that Chaos Space is like one of the main cards that needs to be addressed in that deck, as it is such a powerful spell card starter, extender. It does so much for the deck. And I just think that the deck has to be addressed a little bit. And to pair things off with that, MAGNAMUT as well. Now, this is going to be controversial, but I actually think MAGNAMUT should be banned. I don't think this card is a good card design. I think this card is absolutely busted. You can search any dragon. You get to banish a card on that turn that you activate it, so you get value out of there, and you get a body on the board. It's like 3 things for the price of 1, and it just does way too much. The fact that you can search any dragon, so in Dragon Link, that just gives you access to your entire deck. The main reason almost that dragons are actually busted right now is because of the fact that MAGNAMUT is in existence. It comes back off of branded regained over and over and over, so they're able to search a card on their turn, search a card on our turn, search a card on their turn again. They're able to get a body on board for free. They're able to summon this off of Heradic Seal and continue grinding, playing the game. It's just way too good of a card. I feel like at 1, it's still annoying enough because you're still going to get cards like Lubellion, you're still going to get cards like Heradic Seal, and the minute that the MAGNAMUT becomes in rotation, you can just keep looping it over and over with cards like Branded Regained, and I just don't think a card like this needs to be in the game. Okay, we have the other BYSTIALs all at 3. If there are prevalent dark or light decks, then players should be forced to play the BYSTIALs as a 1-for-1 card, right? We have Druisworm, you're still getting a lot of value out of that card. It's still a really, really good card. There's no reason that BYSTIAL MAGNAMUT should be in the game and just hose dark and light decks, as well as being in a crazy starter, extender, and power card for Dragon Link. So I honestly just think this card should go, and then we don't really have to address anything else in the BYSTIAL line. If we do have to limit MAGNAMUT, then we would definitely have to limit Lubellion as well, because that would just mean 4 copies of MAGNAMUT, right? So we just don't want MAGNAMUT to be in rotation. I personally think this card should be banned. I know it's controversial, but I'd like to hear what you guys think about this in the comments. I'm just going to go hard in and be completely honest with how I feel about the metagame right now. And another card talking about starters and extenders and consistency, Pot of Prosperity. I've been saying this for the longest time, but this card absolutely needs to go to 1. It's being played in basically every deck in the metagame right now. There's no deck that has any drawbacks from this card. The way they printed this card was weird because the time that they printed it, the drawback was actually decently good because the decks actually relied on their extra deck. But nowadays, there's so many decks with just 1-card starters that don't play a maximum extra deck that you're able to burn through 6 cards very easily and rely on the 1-card starter to tap into the rest of your engine and then just win that way with a couple of extra deck cards. And it's just become like a 3 staple in basically every deck. We have it in Runick sprites, well, just regular sprites, I guess, not Runick. We have it in KASHTIRA. We have it in basically any rogue deck. We have it in certain Labyrinth decks to dig for floodgates. It effectively allows you to dig for any card that's at 3 in your deck, especially when decks nowadays just dig so much through their deck by searching before activating a Prospe even. So activating it after means that you can tap into your sided in cards, you can tap into your floodgates, you can tap into cards that are already busted that exist in the game. Things like Eradicator, Anti-Spell, cards that are already annoying, De-Barrier. Those cards become effectively a 6 copies because we have 3 copies of pot to accommodate that by digging for 6 in like a less than 30 card deck after we thin our deck, which is absolutely crazy. If you run those numbers, guys, this is like at least a quarter of our deck, sometimes like a third of our deck that we're able to flip through to get that card. And it's just way too consistent. It does way too much. Having this card at 1 will also allow us to have more room in the space in our main deck, so we can encourage creativity for decks. We can play more tech cards. We can play different card options instead of having to spoon feed this card at 3 into every deck and shove it in, and then we're only left at 37 spots, right? So in my opinion, it has to go to 1. And Runick cards as well. Runick, Tip, and Fountain, these cards have to go to 1. Like, there's no excuse that these cards are still in the game. They do way too much. They're very unpleasant to play against. They're very unpleasant to play with because of the fact that you skip your battle phase. There can be arguments or issues that arise in real life, the fact that you may or may not have skipped your battle phase, the fact that you know, you might go on a time, you might be rushing your opponent so you can get the battle phase to attack. It's just an unpleasant card engine at its core, and the fact that they can draw 3 cards on their turn, draw 3 more on, you know, your turn, I just think these cards have to go to 1 at the minimum. Like, I'm sure they'd still be playable even with these cards at 1, but it'll be hit enough that they're not going to be splashed into everything because it has started to get annoying seeing Runick everything. Other cards actually go to 1. I think Sprite Blue. Sprites, I know they're not like the most busted card, but it's gotten to the point where they could be a little bit less consistent, and I think Sprite Blue will just whittle down the power level a little bit. It's just kind of hard to play through Sprite boards when they have Sprite Carrot, Sprite Red, and a Sprite Double Cross or a Smashers set, and I feel like that's just going to be prevalent in the metagame over and over and over as they print more level 2s, as they print more cards to play with, and that engine can be internally splashable, so I'd like to see a blue hit for consistency reasons. Other cards that need to be hit. KASHTIRA, Unicorn. Please put this card to 1. It's so powerful. It's way too powerful in tandem with Birth, which I also think should go to 1. There's no excuse that this card is at 3. The fact that it allows you to normal summon a KASHTIRA from your hand without any drawbacks. The fact that it allows you to have follow-up extenders by reborning from your banished or graveyard. The fact that it banishes 3 spells upon the resolution, so it completely hoses decks like Branded Fusion, where the way you build a chain is because it's your turn, so their KASHTIRA Birth will be chain link 2. They're going to banish the targets that you needed in your graveyard to resolve the effect of a card that you summon. It just does too much, and I think these cards absolutely need to go to 1. And in fact, on top of all of that, I think ARISEHEART should be banned too, because I'm sick and tired of dealing with this card personally, and I think the metagame is shifting completely around this card. It's forcing players to play cards like Book of Moon, forcing players to play cards like Hurikara, forcing players to side specifically for this card and not be able to play a lot of cards that would have otherwise been very nice in a healthy format of Yu-Gi-Oh! For example, things like Forbidden Droplet. It just can't be played because of the existence of ARISEHEART banishing everything. We can't pay costs to the graveyard. We can't even play cards like Ghost Ogre. Like, it just makes the metagame heavily skewed towards the fact that this card is at 1. And I think even if we hit Birth and Unicorn to 1, as we saw in the OCG, when they had 1 of each card, KASHTIRA was still a tier 1 deck, even with 1 Fenrir, 1 Unicorn, 1 Birth. As long as they were able to stick the turn 1 ARISEHEART, that just meant like half the games were over on the spot as it currently is in the metagame, right? If you don't have an out to ARISEHEART, then you're losing the game. So I just think let's get rid of this card, period. We'll put Unicorn to 1, Birth to 1. We still have 3 Fenrir, so we can splash that into other decks. Maybe just play like a KASHTIRA as a grind deck with other engines, but let's deal with the ARISEHEART and get rid of the problem once and for all. Moving on, let's talk about Triple Tactics Talent. I strongly think this card should go to 1, and the fact of the matter is that this card, it's another card that's either insane when it's good or completely awful when it's bad. Like, if it's dead, if your opponent didn't use any hand traps, they're not using monster effects, it's completely crap, right? Now, the issue with this card is that when it's good, it's way too good. For example, if you play this into a KASHTIRA board, when they have ARISEHEART Fenrir, you can't really do anything as a KASHTIRA player. It's like, either way, they're gonna be able to get a monster. We're gonna have to start banishing our own ARISEHEART. It does like a +3 for the value of one card, and they get to take control of a monster. It's just too swingy, in my opinion. It also punishes players for playing hand traps. So if you're playing a combo deck, and they go first, and they set up their huge combo, and then they have the talents for your 1 or 2 hand traps, it's like, okay, I tried to ash something, and now they're going to talents and rip out my other hand trap, or they're going to talents and draw 2. They're going to be able to get so far ahead and punishing me for trying to defend myself going second against a combo heavy deck by playing hand traps. You know what I mean? Like, we're already on the defensive. We're trying desperately to live in this duel, and we're getting punished because of it. And in my opinion, it's just not really fair. Going second, it's a similar argument. This card, sometimes when there's a metagame with no hardcore Omni negates, it becomes so swingy, it becomes so powerful that I think at 3 copies, it's just a little bit too dangerous as a card to have in the metagame. Now, putting it to 1 also encourages more players to play Triple Tactics Thrust, which is far worse going first, right? That card can only set traps going first, which effectively doesn't really do much besides setting something crazy like an Eradicator or a D-Barrier. It doesn't do a lot for the deck going, especially in game 1, right? You don't have a lot of traps that are prevalent in the metagame besides an end engine trap, which doesn't really occur often in deck engines. And then there's probably something like an infinite impermanence, which is fine. We don't really care. Whereas tactics allows them to rip your hand, allows them to draw 2 cards, has more options, it's more broken. But thrust allows you to search for tactics in game 2 and game 3 going second. So it's like having the 1 copy will encourage the usage of thrust anyways. So I think this card could be fine at 1. Another card that needs to be banned, Eradicator. We don't even really need to talk about this. We saw so many games and on the spot in both WCQs for Euros as well as an NA. This card has always been busted, and the minute that the game became so power crept where you can easily put a 2500 attack body onto the board with the existence of things like XYZs, Links, Fusions that all have huge attack and happen to be dark, this card had to go, especially because it's searchable at 1 card in decks like Labyrinth. It's just way too powerful. The fact that they can rip your hand, they see your hand, then they see the next 3 turns of draws. This is an old, outdated card design, guys. This cannot be in the game. This cannot be a real card that just ends games on the spot, that is so one-sided and easy to set up. No. This card absolutely has to go. No arguments there, and I'm sure most people would agree. Another card that I need to see go is Anti-Spell Fragrance. This is no different than Imperial Order. It's unfair when someone goes first, puts up a huge board, sets Anti-Spell Fragrance, plays all their spells, they're good, they set their spells, they're protected, they set their traps, flips Anti-Spell Fragrance. We have a lot of decks nowadays that rely on spell cards as starters. We have a lot of decks today that rely on spell cards as board breakers as well. Spell cards as extenders, these cards cannot be played, and when we look at our hand and see a bunch of green cards, nope, we are not going to be able to play the game, and especially staring down an Omni Negate card like Baron de Fleur, we're not going to be able to chain a Cosmic Cyclone to get rid of the Anti-Spell Fragrance. Oh, no. That Anti-Spell Fragrance is staying there to look at us with its ugly face. Like, look at those beady little eyes. It's like, how could you... Every time I see this card across the table, I get PTSD. I just want to see this card go. It's unfair. A card that says your opponent cannot play does not need to exist in the game. We don't have to read any more than that. It says your opponent, neither player can activate, which is effectively your opponent cannot activate, which is effectively you cannot activate when you're your opponent's opponent. So yeah, let's get this card banned. Other cards that I also want to see go. Okay, Tikaboo, Gozen Match, and Rivalry. I honestly just don't want these cards in the game. It's a similar vein as Anti-Spell Fragrance and Skill Drain. These cards are one-sided. They end the game so easily. Like we saw in the World Championship, Tikaboo carried Jeremy Mitchell all the way to top 4, especially with the deck Vanquish Soul, because this card is just so powerful. Other decks just cannot play through it. It's effectively a floodgate that says you cannot play. And nowadays that all archetypes are effectively the same types or the same different attributes, it makes it like these cards are just so prevalent and so one-sided that I just don't think that they should belong in the game. I just think that they're way too powerful. If they're not going to ban them, which they probably wouldn't, then yeah, we could put them at the limited spot instead, so they're just at 1 copies each. And then that way we don't really have to deal with them, right? Like that way there's no 3 copies. So if our opponent sides in like 1 copy, that's fine. If they have it, they have it. The chances between 3 and 1 copies are so drastic that it would change the metagame where these cards would not have any impact. So in my opinion, I could definitely see these cards go to 1 as well, instead of being banned. But ideally, they would be banned in a perfect world. I know that the world is not perfect, so we could just see them go to 1 instead. And yeah, I mean, I'd like to hear your guys' opinions on this. I know you guys probably think that I hit on trap decks so much, but it's just a matter of the fact is sometimes it's just unfair when you don't get to play. You know, I'd rather prefer trap decks where they're healthy, grindy, like there's +1. Cards like Dogmatic of Punishment, sure, that's fine. You get a +1, you get 2 for 1. It's like gritty. You grind, and you're able to play the game. But cards like Floodgates, you know, Skill Drain, Gozen Match, Tikaboo, and Rivalry of the Warlords, it just doesn't let the players play the actual game like it's intended to. So that's why I heavily want to hit these cards. Anywho, that's all I had up for my opinion on what should happen on the ban list. If there are any cards I missed, definitely let me know. If there are any cards that you think shouldn't be on here and that we're absolutely crazy, I'm crazy for putting these on this video, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback. And other than that, we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in.